In the autumn of 2022, Culturopolis, a conference co-organized by the Culture Institute of Barcelona and Culture Action Europe, brought together researchers, cultural workers, artists, and policymakers to exchange ideas and work around cultural rights.
During 4 days of discussions, presentations, workshops, and artistic programming, participants from near and far gathered to discuss access, cultural practices, innovation, creativity, and much more.
I'm Maya Weisinger from Culture Action Europe.
And I'm Marco Fiore from Michael Culture. Welcome to our 4-part series that explores the current discourse and practice around cultural rights in our communities across Europe. Today's episode focuses on diversity, on the difficulties around invisibility or lack of diversity, and on the importance of participation and the decision-making capacity inherent in the design of cultural policies.
At the Culturopolis conference, we had the opportunity to talk with a few voices from across the sector who are looking critically at how the spaces around them support, or don't, people from different backgrounds and experiences to participate in artistic and cultural activities.
Barcelona is a city that pulsates, that breathes, that wants to live, like the waves in the sea. In the center, its streets crisscross every 50 meters to form small squares. At the edges of the streets, small bars host different people. Everyone talks animatedly, with some shouting in between. As the capital of Catalonia, the bustling metropolis is home to over 1.62 million inhabitants, with non-national and foreign-born nationals making up a significant portion of the population. Among the diverse group, the largest minority are the Italians, comprising almost 50% of the foreign population. They are followed closely by people from Ecuador, Pakistan, Bolivia, Peru, China, Morocco, France, and Colombia. It is a melting pot of culture, each adding their own distinct shout to this busy city.
In such a city, talking about diversity is a must. It's not only about ethnicity, but also about sexuality, gender, social status, and religion. One of the main themes of Culturopolis was precisely this. Researchers, speakers, projects, and artists showed the many meanings this word can have in Europe. We had a chance to meet them and ask a few questions. Our aim? To understand what the cultural sector does for diversity and what it could do better.
El Molino Theatre, 8 a.m., first day. Before one of the project presentation rounds, I have an appointment with Vaida and Indre. The founders of Creating Homeless sat down with me to discuss their journey with this project. The focus of the project is on including marginalized groups who are often left out of the cultural activities. They shared that their initiative offers art therapy to the residents of Panevėžys shelter in Lithuania. The goal is to help liberate them from the complexes of being homeless and encourage them to reclaim their independence. Indre and Vaida spoke passionately about the importance of their work and how it all started.
We were talking what we could do, with which target group we could do, and then one person from municipality told us, look, you forgot something, and it's homeless people, and nobody thinks about them. Maybe we should do that?
Yeah, it's almost they don't really exist, even though this homeless shelter is a budget institution, it's under the roof of municipality. But we mainly think about them as just given the roof, food, social security, but the arts or any other kind of interaction with them was non-existent for many years, really.
As they spoke, I couldn't help but feel impressed by their dedication to truly making a difference in the lives of those who are often forgotten. Creative Homeless is a shining example of how arts can be used as a powerful tool for change. The project has seen 23 homeless participants getting involved since February 2022. All of whom underwent 14 hours of art therapy and worked in small groups of 5 or 6 people. The classes were given in several places, including the local history museum. The sessions ended with a final group workshop and the opening of a public exhibition.
Homeless shelter residents themselves, they, kind of rejected us at the beginning, and they didn't like the idea, and I think homeless shelter staff also were very skeptical about the format and the ideas. And but I think when we got into it and we got the ball rolling, I think everybody saw this. Actually, perhaps this might work. And we did put a lot of effort and hours, and it was all about really making very, very personal connections. It was trying to be not necessarily different people with them, but it was about tapping really deep into our own, experiences or non-existent experiences of what these people are, of what they like or maybe what they don't like. It was all about an empathy and talking as much as possible and listening to these stories. And I think then we kind of resonated with them. I think we all, at the end of the day, we all absolutely the same people. It's just the walk of life,
And the perspective of the project is different. It's not about tokenizing a socially marginalized group. It was about giving them back an often overlooked dimension.
It was not our intention to make them artists, but if through the activities and the engagement, they became more familiar and less afraid in engaging into other sort of like art activities, then, it's great.
Mm-hmm. It's not like we opened doors of cultural spaces for them, but we made them to believe that the doors are open.
While Creative Homeless has reopened that part of life and sociality to the people in the project, Indra and Vaida have realized there is also work to be done from within cultural institutions.
Training is also needed to the cultural institutions. I think it's probably in not only Panevėžys, but I think it's in Lithuania and all the countries probably. And we're not only talking about how do you deal with when a homeless person comes in, how do you deal with then when a disabled person enters, someone with perhaps, neurodiverse, and it's really quite a poor situation, and the majority of staff, it's not that because they have never dealt with, but it's because they have not been trained, and these are not these situations that they know how to deal with.
As part of the Culturopolis conference, which focused on cultural rights, I couldn't help but ask the two girls what they thought the impact of these policy tools might be for the groups of people they worked with. Women hear the right to show one's humanity, one's way of life, and all that it means to exist, socially and culturally. What has changed thanks to cultural rights in Panevėžys?
It is a very big opportunity because Panevėžys, where we're from, is changing culturally and is on the cusp of very, very big changes. And we are having 2 new art institutions opening in the next year. I think these 2 things that are happening in Panevėžys, in our home city, really can play a very huge part in the cultural rights and kind of bringing this to the attention, because it's much more difficult to do with the older, more established institutions. Everything is set, and I think we kind of are on the rebel side in a good way talking about it, and just the fact that we are here in Culturopolis, with the project that no one really thought that this even can happen, is already, I think, proving the point that we are on the right track.
Listening to Marco's conversation, I thought a lot about how we, as practitioners and even more so as institutions, often fall into a well-worn pattern of defining diversity by numbers or trying to quantify impact. Creative Homeless made space to adapt and listen and learn as they moved through the complexities of their work. And in the end, the simple act of listening became such a crucial part of their work. Even with diversity and inclusion being a key goal for many organizations, there seems to be a disconnect between what it means to define diversity and what it means to actually make it happen. Luckily, in between the flow of people in and out of Culturopolis Central Command on Avinguda del Paralel, Marco had the opportunity to sit down with researcher Jocelyn Reeder, who is investigating research looking at gender within global cultural policy.
5 p.m. on my second day here in Barcelona. We sit in a booth at the entrance to the Parallel 42 theatre after I tried with little success to communicate in Spanish with the agents at the entrance. Not far from us, cars scurry down one of those driveways typical of the city. Jocelyn is a smiling person, Australian to the core. 15 years as a dancer behind her that allowed her to understand the arts and cultural sector from the inside out. This experience allowed her to see the contradictions in the industry between the ideology and the reality of the sector, especially when it comes to gender. She speaks to me with enthusiasm and precision about her research.
3 key findings came out of the analysis. The first one was the assumption of diversity of cultural expressions as tradable, instrumental, and public. And whilst we think of that, we think, what does this mean for gender? And it has kind of 2 really clear results, and that is firstly in terms of the labor within the cultural and creative industries. So this kind of working conditions where it's more self-responsibilized and individualized and precarious work conditions creates a greater reliance on women as or underpaid carers. And it also, on a more meta level, makes invisible the already existing participation of women within the cultural. The second finding is the assumption of diversity of cultural expressions as empowerment. That is, women can be empowered with the help of cultural expressions to either consume or produce within the sector of the creative and cultural industries. Lastly, our final finding is in regards to the claim of diversity within the convention, and that's the main agenda. And here we kind of deconstruct culture, and we try and understand within the convention, culture is more concentrated or concerned with that which is state-centric, conservationist, and static.
These discrepancies are not only related to gender issue. Following the footsteps of Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, and Judith Butler, Jocelyn's research can be seen in the light of intersectionality. That is, the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender.
If you put a feminist lens onto policy and really pick it apart and understand each assumption that goes into the policy that's being made, how can we see our blind spots? Yes, I'm looking at women here, and it's taken me to the point to understand what is post-feminism and how this is expressed nowadays for women, but you can definitely do it on various intersecting levels of identity construction. And as a white woman, I can very much understand each of these stages in my own cultural journey. But at the same time, I think it's just more of an example of when we place a critical feminist lens, intersectional feminist lens on policy, how can we then understand the ways in which it becomes excruciatingly problematic and it really renders diversity almost meaningless?
In a broader view of the discourse, Jaslyn is very clear about what diversity means and how this concept has evolved over time.
I think diversity has become much more prominent nowadays, which is fantastic because it's become a mainstream topic, and it's become something that people are aware is a positive thing that we should be working towards. I think there is critical engagement with it, but at the same time, I think to an extent it's been emptied of its meaning because it's become a buzzword. And I think it allows us, to a degree, to sidestep problems of structural inequality and facing the hard questions that come with who is represented when we talk about meaningful diversity. So I think it has changed. I think it's expanded. I think it depends who you ask in terms of what diversity means for them. And I would just be wary of, letting diversity become just another mainstreaming topic that becomes emptied of any real political power.
And so there is a need for a sharp change. I talked to her about how in my work in the cultural sector I notice a majority of women, but then when you look at the apexes of institutions, there is, the percentages drop dramatically. And on this seemingly paradoxical situation, I ask her for a final opinion.
Yeah, I talk to my colleagues about this all the time. And as much as it's uncomfortable to say, if you work in the creative industries, it is a networking industry. And we can't help it. We're social creatures. Bias is a natural part of our human DNA, our human psychology. So there's no point pretending like it doesn't exist. But at the same time, the cultural and creative industries is a bit of a boys' club. And at the same time, we still failed to critically engage with the reality that women a lot of times are on the stage as entertainment or as some sort of cultural consumption, whereas then men come in to say the serious or the important stuff. I think we haven't managed to bridge that divide, but I think that the people who can give the keys over to the kingdom are not engaged enough in this topic to realize that, these spaces need to be expanded and that a range of voices need to be heard on a more political level.
How do you change things? When you work with subjects like diversity, it's a question you end up asking yourself many times. You see the problems clearly, but the solutions are a little more complex, more fuzzy. The answer for networks like Culture Action Europe and Michael Culture is to act on policies, the ones that affect the lives of citizens. And those who make the policies need a way forward from people who experience those types of problems to understand well how to solve them. That's why Marco met with Sarah Briganti, Deputy Commissioner of the National Plan for the Arts and promoter and co-author of the Porto Santo chapter.
It's 10 a.m. on the third day. I have to retrieve Sara from the crowd after one of the conferences. I recognize her by the white lock in her raven hair. Time to find a quiet space in the theater, and immediately we start talking about the Porto Santo Charter. Developed in 2021 during the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the EU, she explains me that this is a guiding map of principles and recommendations for applying and developing a working paradigm for cultural democracy in Europe. But before talking about cultural democracy, I ask her to explain me what is the space for the concept of democratization of culture in the Charter.
Democratization was a model that showed up first as a proposition, as a way of doing cultural policies from early 60s on, and it was a model that in a way was not so much concerned with diversity. It was very much concerned with access, but in providing that all the people have access to what it was thought of as being the masterpieces for humanity. This model is really based on how you change people. Diversity was not a concern because it was a vision from one person to all, and all being a non-diverse entity, an uniform entity, actually.
On the other hand, there is cultural democracy, the concept on which the Porto Santo Charter is based.
The cultural democracy model is something completely different, and it's raised in around the 70s, actually it's not an easy model to put in practice because it really addresses diversity. If you want to make a policy that is really democratic, you need to listen to everyone and acknowledge that everyone is in himself culture and a cultural being. In cultural democracy model, what you need to change is not the people but institutions. So it's it's the other way around, because institutions, in order to be diverse, in order to provide and work with people and not for people, they need to change all their paradigms, all their beliefs of what is good culture or bad culture, because this idea doesn't exist. It exists a diversity of cultures, and there is a stance of equality.
I also asked Sarah what the paradigm shift has been regarding the concept of diversity. Her response is not only enthusiastic, but also traces historically what she has experienced as a professional.
In the 90s, I remember that everyone was talking about multicultural environments and multiculturality in cities. And this was the buzzword. And then another word appeared, which is interculturality, which is much more interesting. It's not about only the differences, but how can you combine differences, articulate and make another diversity that is coming from the various diversities of the ones who are with you. And how do you form this common ground? So today we are much more interested in this model that articulates different diversities. And this is a concept that is very important for culture, education, the social sector, and so forth. It's a thinking that moves us forward to the way we see the other, and we can act with the other and create something different.
Sarah also talks about the importance of combining information, knowledge and practices from other areas, and stresses how important diversity learning in the educational setting is. She says that when culture meets education, this proposes a completely different approach to education and pedagogy. It approaches a transdisciplinary mode because culture is within all subject matters of life.
If you connect daily life with the contents of each discipline, you can build knowledge through culture, because culture is everything we do and everything we are. And we were talking about diversity. It's actually a very good way to approach the same subject from different perspectives. And this is another matter that is so important in our days, is actually how can a story be told from different points of view. If you only have the official vision of the curricula, you learn one side of the story. But then all the other sides will be erased. It's as if they were never there. And this is a problem of diversity.
Nothing Sarah told me should be taken for granted. More importantly, it is impressive to see how many people were involved in building this charter. But does it all end there? There must be a future for this very important document.
This is not a binding document, so it's about a document with principles and a set of recommendations that you can use or not use. What we are doing is actually asking everyone who took part on the building up of this charter to be voicing it, to be an active actor in bringing the Porto Santo Charter to their practices and to their communities. So there is no it's not an approach that is top-down. It's very much as we did a document that combined many, many diverse voices in it, I would say we planned and we think that the bottom-up approach to make this charter a living charter, a living document, is actually by asking everyone to be an agent of it.
A living charter. These words resonate as I'm arranging the notes for this episode. It's interesting to come across such a strong will, supported by a deep and real knowledge of what you're talking about. Staying grounded is critical when you're building policies, because that's the only way to be beneficial to those who will be directly affected by those proposals. And when it comes to the cultural sector, a great example of people who are directly affected are, of course, artists. And at Culturopolis, the artists were there, animating the conference days and making their voices heard. Marco went to meet with Ariadna Ruyo, who started the artistic project Joanna Dark. Joanna Dark is an artist returning to oral traditions to explore and dismantle gender norms through her music and research. Her first EP, La Lireta, is a music and research project created with the intention of transporting to the present day those songs of past centuries in Catalonia.
It's evening. I don't even know what time it is. I ran from one side to another the conference to record more interviews. But now I'm sitting, my MCA colleagues next to me, and Joanna Dark's show begins. A deep, ancient song, and a melody that comes from techno. The bizarre feeling of being in two different times at the same time. Where does this idea of approaching the music of the past with the gaze of the present come from? After the concert, I managed to stop one of the guys on the stage with Ariadna, who introduces her to me. The first thing I ask her is the real origin of her music.
It began like just to play and investigate a little bit. And then I wanted to approach to my culture and in a way I felt more comfortable. Then I found all these songs talking about so bad about women, and then the inspiration appeared suddenly, and then the concept was so clear. It's like return to the roots, but bringing some awareness.
For the recovery of ancient texts, she seeks reflection on the rural roots of our current customs, as well as the analysis of their present, always from the perspective of women. She composes pieces that bring traditional melodies into experimentation and reinterpretation in a contemporary context.
I think it's both at all, because the past gives us perspective and sense of belonging to think about our present and a space to think about our future also. And the present is giving conscience of the lifestyle of our ancestors also. And maybe an example is my own grandma, that she loves to think about how they lived and to have the knowledge and the experience that she has now. It's like she's always like comparing, no, now and then, no. We give a voice to the woman, but the songs and the oral tradition belong to all human beings. So what we can learn from the society of the past is that the role of the woman was so important in many different perspectives, and there was a clear as I can see in the songs, was a clear conflict or tension between them and with them. I don't know. A lot of pressure on their way of life, judgment, and even hate in some songs, and all like very integrated in the society. It gives us information about a whole system of economy, politics, and culture. I mean, the patriarchy was playing very well then.
A woman who does not fear men does not fear God. Hell is a woman without a guidance. Brave mother makes bad daughter. These are the lyrics in one of her songs. I wonder if, in her opinion, the vision of the woman, even if expressed in different terms, still remains the same.
I have to say that it changed a lot. Even when I talk with my grandma, she's saying that it changed a lot, no? And I can feel that one part of the society is still like maybe trapped in the past, but there's another part that is doing an amazing job on breaking molds. And of course, are appearing different ways of repression also in different words and forms with new tools also. So, I mean, it changed a lot, and also we have new types of and tools to do it.
Joanna talks about the way society is starting to find way to repair itself through new tools of diversifying and including more people. She's also starting to see changes in her local creative environment, and that there is a shift in who is building and growing in the music sector. What is her experience about it?
This question in the past was so obvious, but now I think that we evolved a lot in this area. I think maybe here in Spain or in Barcelona concretely. But I know that there's still maybe the most important thing and is that there is still a salary gap in some areas, not all, but in some areas. And maybe I'm totally wrong, but when now I visualize the music sector, I really see a lot of women doing amazing things.
Before saying goodbye, I have time to ask if she has seen any concrete impacts after the strong campaign regarding cultural rights launched by the municipality of Barcelona.
I can feel and not even me, when I'm talking with some other artists, we have like the paths more clean now. And I feel that it's very much easier to spread our work. Also, I have to say some people that are in this I don't know, in this artistic world, they really want to come to Barcelona to live this. So I mean, some friends I have around the world or maybe in other areas in Spain that they really focus and come here just for this.
I am by the sea. In Paris we don't have the waves that rock us in the evening when we go out drinking with friends. In Paris we have the Seine where it is windy and the terrace where the cold gets into your clothes. There is one thought that has been going around in my head during these 3 days. With all the professionals I met and talked to about diversity in the cultural sector, I realized that there is so much to do, certainly from an ideological perspective, but mostly from a practical point of view. There are so many people working day by day to make things better. We just met a few stunning examples. They are like these waves in front of me, crashing like a multitude on the coast, gently taking possession of it. I wonder what is next. I wonder if we are going to make it. Barcelona in these days still has so many things to show me. I can't wait to discover more and watch many more waves.
This podcast is a collaboration between Michael Culture Association and Culture Action Europe, two network organizations working towards sustainable, diverse, and central spaces for culture. The 4-part series is designed and edited by Maya Weisinger from Culture Action Europe and Marco Fiore from MCA. You can find the link for the sources in the description of this episode. For any comment or suggestion about these episodes, please write to maya@cultureactioneurope.org.
Thank you for listening, and thanks to all the interviewees for participating in the making of this episode. The next episode will be about participation and communities. See you in the next episode.